Your right hand and repeat after me. I, Ketanji Brown Jackson, do solemnly swear
I, Ketanji Brown Jackson, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you very much, and now I'll turn things over to Justice Breyer.
Good. The judicial oath, will you raise your right hand, please? Thank you. I, Ketanji Brown Jackson,
I, Ketanji Brown Jackson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will administer justice
that I will administer justice
without respect to persons
without respect to persons
and do equal right
and do equal right
to the poor and to the rich,
to the poor and to the rich,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
As an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Under the Constitution
And
laws of the United States.
And laws of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And now, on behalf of all of the members of the court, I am pleased to welcome Justice Jackson to the court and to our common calling.
Well, we want to welcome everybody to You and the Law podcast show. We just watched the swearing in of Justice Jackson to the Supreme Court. Keith, another historic day in American history.
An amazing day, man, an emotional day. This has been an amazing last 14 to 15 years as far as seeing African Americans represented in the judicial part of government, the executive part of government, local and state part of government. But to see the first African American female sworn in as a Supreme Court justice, that shows. And then you have your first Black female vice president, and so that just shows little girls that there is a opportunity to be in those positions one day, because I can assure you that those women have worked really hard to get where they are. Nobody gave them anything. So I'm just really excited.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's definitely, something that a lot of young girls of color, they've got a lot of good role models to look up to in a vice president and now a Supreme Court justice, and so many other women who have served in public service. So just another great day in American history. And we wanted to recognize that as we start off our podcast show, because I think it's something that, will tie in with the topic that we're talking about tonight, which is, how will Roe versus Wade impact law enforcement with that decision? And so, it's one of the things I'll say, Keith, is really concerning to see the Supreme Court become so political when it's not supposed to be political.
Well, you're absolutely right, Virgil. It is become a political barn, and it is obvious that it's us versus them on the Supreme Court, that it's those who are on the right versus those who are on the left. And instead of being a a system, a judicial system, the highest court in the land that make common sense decisions, or but the things that they say, case in point, Clarence Thomas is bringing up things that people have fought for, in for as same-sex marriages, and other things that have occurred over the last 20, 25 years. And he's talking about we should look at those to see if they need to be overturned. And it's got a lot of minorities, especially African Americans, concerned, because now is the Civil Rights Act going to be looked at, voter rights going to be looked at. What can we expect out of this Supreme Court in the coming future?
Yeah, well, and this is why people have said over the past weeks, and have said in the past how important it is for people to get out and vote. Whether it's not just your national election, but your local elections as well. But we're seeing what took place with the former president being able to put two people on the Supreme Court, that now there's certain agendas that will be followed through for many decades until something changes with that court system.
Virgil, isn't it amazing how people talk about President Obama's nomination that never made it because they were saying that Mitch McConnell, the turtle, was saying that they didn't want to rush that selection. But it's amazing how in the Trump era or tenure, they rushed two Supreme Court justices. And in going back to as far as I can remember, when Supreme Court justices were being confirmed, I've never seen a Supreme Court justice be disrespected and her qualifications minimized as I have. When you ask another female, ask her, does she know what the definition of a woman is? How disrespectful, how belittling can you be when you ask someone with the credentials of our new Supreme Court justice, if she's asked, does she know what a woman is? That is just you've never seen anything like that, and I wouldn't care if she had been nominated by anybody. You don't ask people that. What are you trying to say when you ask a female, does she know what a woman is? That was so disrespectful, and it's gotten to the point now in politics. It seems to be the more hateful you can be and the more disrespectful you can be. It seems as though that is what people expect, and it becomes a three-ring circus. Who can embarrass the others more than the name calling and the threats and things like that. I was watching the hearings a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and the young lady from Georgia, and her name just escapes me because I did a shout out to her on Facebook. And when you start, she was a worker at the polls. Had been working for polls for 10 years or more. Her relatives had a vested interest in the elections, and so to be called the names that she was called, Virgil, and to be followed, and her mother threatened to the point that they had to leave their home. And this young lady is scared to death based on the fact that there was a perception. All she was doing was her job, and there was a perception that she did something illegally, and then she's got to live in fear the rest of her life. That is crazy.
Yeah,
that's the craziest thing that I've ever heard in my life. And But that's the world we're in right now. It's the world of how much fear and how much distortion can we create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, when you put it into perspective, Keith, a handful of people are behind what has happened in the past year or so. Ever since the changing of a president, there's been a handful of people who have been who have controlled this narrative, who have influenced so many things. And I know we're not, you know, we've got another topic to talk about, but it's just really when you watch the Senate hearings this past week, you are left with wondering there if it could get any worse than what you've already seen from witnesses talk to those senators during these hearings. And the fact that, again, like I said, you've got a handful of people who have been able to control what has taken place in politics in the United States.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into the show tonight. And you know, man, it's sort of like it's each and every day you wake up, you want to know which controversial topic is going to be discussed and which controversial changes are going to be made, and you know what's that going to cause for the day. You know, what type of violence, what type of controversy is it going to cause for the day. And you know, we're all you know, you and I were born during the Roe versus Wade era. We couldn't probably, well, I know probably we couldn't understand and appreciate what this case did for women's rights.
Yeah.
And whether you're pro-abortion and anti-abortion or anti-abortion, what I tell people, that's not your decision to make. That's that individual's decision, and it is become such a political topic to the point. There are some states, Virgil, that have said it doesn't matter if a woman was sexually assaulted or not.
Exactly.
An abortion is not an option.
Yeah.
And like I said, it doesn't matter whether or not you are pro or you know, if you're pro-life or not. It simply says that how does something over 50 years, how does it become such a topic and be relived and has caused so much controversy, and basically has told women they don't have a right to make that decision. And basically now if you're victimized, you're a victim of a heinous crime such as sexual assault
Or incest.
In some states, that's just, you know, the way that comes across. Well, that's your problem. You just deal with it. Yeah. And I think that's a bad message. And yeah. I will tell you, man, every day just waking up to something different. And you know, we talk about what impact will that have on policing. Well, we know that there's going to be protests. I believe the majority of them are going to be civil, but I do believe there's going to be some unrest in some of the protests. And but how do you handle that? How do you prepare for that? Well, number one, we must realize as law enforcement and former law enforcement and current law enforcement chiefs that the First Amendment is real. People do have those rights, but we know they don't have the right to be disruptive and destructive. But we have to respect and provide the same security, no matter what your personal belief is. And so those are the things. But what it's also going to force police chiefs to sit down with the organizers of these protests and assure them and make the organizers realize, make them comfortable that the police are going to be there to ensure that their First Amendment rights are not violated.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I want to, you know, we have a lot of women who follow the podcast show. And I hope that, you know, we get a lot, you know, more people to tune in and join us because I think people will be just as shocked as you and I will be as we have this conversation tonight on the podcast, because I'm a play a video, but prior to this video, I'm going to share with everybody that in the 1950s in Pennsylvania, state troopers were used to surround a house where women were getting abortions, and obviously then it was illegal. Some neighbor had called and reported this. Well, Keith, these state troopers went into this house while these women, most of them didn't have on any clothes, and forced them during the middle of some of these procedures to stop doing what they were doing, took them to a doctor, and had the doctor to check the women, examine the women who had not received a procedure yet. And so when you think about this, Keith, it is like, here's a man who's in a uniform, who has a wife, who has a mother, who probably has a daughter, but you're going to go into a room just because the law says you shall go and enforce this law, and look at a woman who is half dressed or not even dressed and remove her because this is what the law tells you to do. And these women had they could not refuse. So this was forced upon them. And so I'm gonna play a quick video on a news article where a city in Pennsylvania is taking steps to ensure that their local police department does not get involved in what's going on across the country. So hold on just a second.
Township spokeswoman says this is the idea of township commissioners, and they're the ones who make and draft ordinances, and so this is their plan to carry out. The ordinance basically says that there will be no taxpayer money or resources used to enforce it if Roe v. Wade is overturned and abortions become illegal.
We are taking a leadership role in this, and putting things in place to, make sure that we preserve a woman's right to make a choice.
Once news broke of the possible overturning of Roe versus Wade,
I think that there was a consensus among the majority of the members of the Board of Commissioners.
And the concern led to this, an ordinance that would limit enforcement related to reproductive health.
If a ban is passed, then it's going to put the police, whatever law enforcement agency is in a position to enforce that ban, in the position of going and arresting women who are in the process of either seeking or obtaining abortions.
Jack Larkin drafted the ordinance. He says the goal is to keep the township-funded entities and resources from preventing a woman's access to abortion.
Our ordinance does nothing to prevent the state police, the FBI, or any other law enforcement agency from coming in.
That's the reason these are state laws. You can't just pick and choose. It's not a buffet table. And if you do, it's chaos and mayhem.
Former federal and state prosecutor Tom Hogan says the township may be overstepping legally if this passes, and says it puts police in a tough spot if the bosses are saying don't investigate, but state law says they must. Larkin says city officials in Philadelphia have already chosen it won't enforce certain laws, and says that goes to show his ordinance is legal. And while Radnor may be the first to look at protecting abortion rights by directing police not to investigate,
I'm embarrassed.
Sean Farhi is also on the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners, and he says the group is overstepping and should not be making this the issue it wants to take a leap on.
I am pro-choice. I'm 100% pro-choice, and I am 100% a Democrat. I just don't like these political games. I think it's terrible, terrible for our community, our staff, and I want no part of it.
Now, Now, while Larkin says that precedent has been set, especially citing Philadelphia, on what crimes it will or won't enforce or laws for those crimes, Hogan says, what would it be if other towns around decided to pick and choose what crimes and laws they wanted to enforce? He said you wouldn't know from one town to the other what is in effect and what is not. Another problem he says he sees with this. Now it's going to be up to the commissioners to talk about this and debate this starting Monday night. Reporting live in Radnor Township, Deanna Durante, NBC 10 News.
That's embarrassing, man.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, Keith, it just really kind of goes to show you how much the government has intervened in a woman's right to choose what she wants to do with her body.
Man, all that is trying to make a name for themselves, man, to get on a bigger platform. Man, listen, man, that's what that is, man. You know, the more, and I've seen this on local government, man. I saw it in Norman when one of the little men who was on the council there stood up and had a problem when the mayor wanted a equality, actually a gay rights day. And him and a group of other extreme conservatives, man, basically just said some things that were extremely disheartening and hurtful. And he made national news. And that's what these guys want, man. These men and women want. They want a platform. Because why is local government getting involved in this? And, you know, it does put, and you can't decide as a police department, you can't cherry pick what offenses you're going to enforce, man. And then when you're being forced to enforce certain laws, normally it comes from somebody pissing somebody off, and they want to utilize that to flex their muscles. So this is crazy, man. You know, it is extremely it's extremely hurtful. It pisses me off. The fact that you've got a man sitting up there who's on a local governmental entity and basically thinking that he can say and do whatever he wants to. It comes down to where you had state and local officials wanting local police departments, municipal police departments to enforce immigration. Why? That's your personal belief.
Yeah.
That's your personal opinion. You can't tell somebody to enforce that, your personal opinion.
And that's what's going to happen with this abortion ban. The fact that now, once again, you're going to have law enforcement pulled into something that, in my opinion, is not for a police officer to show up at somebody's. Let's put this scenario like this. Let's say a neighbor says, hey, I know this person down, a couple of houses down from me, she's going to go and get an abortion. She calls the police and says, hey, there's this new law that says these people can't get an abortion and you got to do something. Now, can you imagine a dispatcher telling an officer to go to this house and talk to this lady about her going to get an abortion? And now this woman basically is going to tell this officer, it's none of your business what I'm going to do, where I'm going. And now you got an overzealous officer taking things too far, turning the situation into something that it shouldn't be, versus saying, listen, you haven't committed a crime, you can go on about your business. But I think, Keith, those type of scenarios are going to happen because it did happen in the 1950s, in the 60s.
Well, Virgil, to me, and I got to shout out to my classmate, to my academy mate, man, my man, Gene Jones. What's up, Gene? Thank you for listening.
Yeah, definitely.
So it goes back to, okay, so what next, man? Are we gonna tell women that they can't breastfeed in public? I mean, we've had some police departments that have actually approached women who were breastfeeding and told them that was illegal, that was actually Um, um, it was disruptive and also disturbing that they were breastfeeding. And so, that is the craziest thing. And I've had people as a police officer and as a police chief, had people call for things like that. So that's what you're going to have. You're going to have somebody talking to someone about they're considering having an abortion. They're going to tell somebody, but they're going to call local authorities because it's illegal, and you're going to get this disruptive incident, basically because some police officer or some local jurisdiction, local government has set this ordinance in place, and that's what I'm talking about. That's why we've had such a difficult time throughout the years, being able to retain trust of our communities, because we have been used as law enforcement officers, many unwilling to participate and some willing to participate in order to use force to do things that really and truly law enforcement should not get involved in. And so that's why we have a difficult time with what we're going through now: recruiting, retention, a lack of community support. Because here we go again. We're using police to carry out the agendas of our politicians.
Well, and Keith, I don't believe any. I'm gonna say this. If the legislative branch wants to enforce laws that is going to compromise the safety and the relationship between the police and the community, then they need to determine some other way of enforcing that law, because you're going to have, if an incident like this occurs, a woman is injured, or a woman is a child, whatever it may be. And now that's another thing that's put into the spotlight between the police and the minority community. And most of these women may turn out to be more minority women who really don't have any other choice to do the things that they need to do. And so, again, Keith, I think it's just another situation where police officers are going to be put in a position, and you're going to have a lot of knee-jerk reaction to it, to say, well, this is what we're told to do. And I've heard other police chiefs say, well, we cannot decide which laws we will enforce and which laws we won't. Well, yeah, you do, because there are some laws that you will ignore, and there are some laws you will be pretty heavy-handed on.
Yeah, it's done every day.
Yeah, and so this conversation about, and then you have people who want to use the word. Well, it says we shall. It's almost as if this word shall is a word that is so superior that if you break that shall law or wording, something is going to happen to you. And so, again, I think I will ask any male police officer, if this was your sister who had to do what she had to do, would you want another officer to go in and to see your sister in a clinic or whatever with no clothes on, having an abortion, or half dressed, or whatever it may be? As a man, you wouldn't want to do that.
Being examined and consulted.
Yeah.
On whether abortion is right for her. Man, we just get to the point, we stay focused so much on what the law says, the letter of the law.
Yeah.
And we forget that there's another part of that called the spirit of the law.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just get caught up in that.
Yeah.
And that we get, this is what we got to do because this is the right thing, and it's unethical. And that's why it's very important for law enforcement officers not to get their personal feelings involved. Unfortunately, you can't count on that 100%. You just can't.
No, and Keith, we have seen so many situations where police officers have overstepped I'm not going to say their authority, but have overstepped their interaction with especially people of color, especially black men and black women, to where it further divides that any chance of having any type of positive relationship between the black community and law enforcement. And some of these guys care about it, some of them they don't care about it, because they're going to say, I've got the badge and I've got the gun and I've got the power or the authority that the law tells me that I have. And so it's a concern, because you've just got guys who, once they get on the power trip, they're going to stay on that power trip.
You know, you sent me that article today regarding this person that's a upper command staff member for the Tulsa Police Department, and just basically saying that if a police chief does not allow his officers to follow the letter of the law, no matter what, that makes him a bad leader.
A weak leader.
A weak leader. That makes that police chief a weak leader.
Yeah.
Where does common sense kick in? I don't think anytime there's not a police chief, and I know I've never told anybody not to follow the law. What I've asked people to do is use common sense and determine what's a priority and what's not. But to have a person who's in an upper command staff position do an article that talks about what makes a weak chief. Someone who's never been in that position, somebody who will probably never be in that position with that mindset. That's why we can't get ahead. That's why, as a police chief, you cringe knowing that type of person is out on the street. That type of person is giving commands to officers regarding these type of situations, giving them the direction on let's make this happen. Let's stop this really quick. And officers are going to listen to that individual and follow their lead. So that was very disheartening, that article you sent today. But it's a reality that you do have people. This man's part of a command staff, and he makes those kind of comments. And they don't think nothing's wrong with it. No, and I will tell you that it's amazing that he waited until an African American chief was sworn in there before he made these type of statements.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never seen him make those kind of statements when the previous chief, who's a friend of mine, was there. But you wait until an African American chief comes in and you make those kind of comments and those statements.
Yeah.
So we know who you're talking about. We know what you're trying to get at. But it's just the fact that why now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, I got another video I want to play for those who have tuned in and listened, that are listening to the podcast, and want to remind you that, you can chat with us in the chat room. You got a question about the topic that we're talking about tonight, which is how will Roe v. Wade impact policing? And this next video, Keith, is definitely going to shock you. It's going to shock the listeners, because this is actually something that women in policing have been forced to do.
Washington, D.C. police officers say they were told to get an abortion or lose their job. That is this week's Speak Out segment. D.C. Assistant Police Chief Chanel Dickerson stunned her community meeting last week when she claimed she was told to get an abortion or be fired when she was an 18-year-old cadet.
When I was 18 years old as a police cadet, I was told I had to have an abortion or be fired from the MPD cadet program.
Dickerson is the highest-ranking Black woman at the police department. And after she came out with that shocking allegation last week, another officer spoke out as well. Here is what Karen Arifko, who has been a D.C. police officer for 24 years, exclusively told Fox 5 D.C.
I went and told my class sergeant that I was pregnant. And She said I need to have an abortion, and she referred me to a doctor in D.C. to get it done. It's so unfair, and now I've never been able to have a kid.
Officer Karen Arifko says she wishes she quit her job and had her baby instead. She was never able to have a baby again. Now, D.C. Assistant Police Chief Chanel Dickerson is one of 10 Black women who filed a class action lawsuit against the city's Metropolitan Police Department, alleging discrimination on the basis of their race and gender. If these claims are true, that these women were forced to get an abortion or be fired from their job, this is an abomination on an enormous scale. These women who dedicated their lives to protect and serve us were not even allowed to protect their own babies. How many more women are there who have not come out to share their stories? And what other cities has this happened? We grieve and we weep and we mourn with these women and their babies that they never got to hold in their own arms. And we pray that their stories do not end in vain, but lead to more truth coming out and to more light scattering the darkness of abortion.
So Keith, we go from.
Doesn't surprise me.
I mean, you know what? And I think this is why I hope there's a lot of women that are watching our podcast show or will listen to the rebroadcast of this podcast show, because you've got women telling another female cadet, if you want your job, you need to go get an abortion. Or you've got a male superior telling a woman, if you want your job, you got to go get an abortion. So on two sides, you got people telling people, don't get an abortion. Then you got people telling Black women to go and get an abortion.
Well, let me say this, Virgil. Early in law enforcement and academies, women were told not to, it would be a bad idea, a bad choice to become pregnant in the academy or while you're on probation, that you would be fired. That was told. There have been women that have been told, if you want to advance, you shouldn't have kids. There have been women that have been chastised for taking time off to be with their newborn baby. There have been women that have been chastised for taking off because their child is ill. I know one supervisor who made a comment one time. He didn't understand why anybody would have a child. But this is another high up executive that made that comment about he didn't understand. I mean, he made this comment during a briefing when we had a couple of female officers who had gone out on maternity leave, and basically said that that's what I'm talking about. They're not here when you need them. And who wants to have kids? Why would anybody have kids? And women shouldn't be allowed to have kids when they're police officers, and they shouldn't want to have. I mean, so these were comments that I know for a fact were said. This was accepted behavior. Accepted practice back then. So do I believe that occurred? Absolutely, I believe it occurred. Do I believe that only occurred to Black women? No, I think there may have been some whites and some other women that may have been told that, but I think that these women have enough courage that we saw have the courage to come forward and say what happened. And people say, well, why'd they wait so long? Doesn't matter how long they waited. That's not your decision to make. Their decision is when they felt comfortable talking about it, they did. And I want to commend them from coming forward. Yeah. So, but that's how, and that's what Roe versus Wade, the overturn of Roe versus Wade does. It solidifies that women don't have a choice. That women have that there are some that see women as a person that you do what you're told, not what you want to. And so this is going to set us back. This is going to set us back, just like the redistricting with voting and the changes that are going on at certain state levels, and the fact that some states prohibit the teaching of African American history or critical race theory. It goes back to certain people have rights that they will protect, and they don't care about the rights of others.
Yeah. Well, Keith, we got one of our listeners, Bree, who made a comment that it's so sad and inappropriate that women have their rights taken advantage of. And, this happens not just in law enforcement, it happens in the military. This is a much more widespread situation that involves women in law enforcement, women in the military, and the fact that you have a government and you've got mainly men who are trying to tell women what they can and cannot do with their bodies. But if you're in law enforcement and if you're in the military, if you become pregnant, you've got the majority of men telling these women what they need to do in order to save their careers, either as a police officer or as a military person. And that's just not right, Keith. And I think a lot of people, I've got messages where people have asked this question. You guys are two black men in law enforcement. Why are you guys having this? Why is it so important to have this conversation? Why are you not talking about something else? And I think this is something that has to be talked about among black men, because if we don't have that conversation, Keith, who will?
Well, who recognizes discrimination more than African Americans, but especially African American men? Who for years, African American women too. So that's why I said that's why I said I prefaced it by saying African Americans. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. We've not been inaccurate on our podcast. We haven't ever said anything that's not true. Some people will say that we did, but you and I do our research before we say anything. But at the end of the day, Virgil, it sets us back, and it makes minorities concerned regarding what else is going to be turned away now. So you will take that right away, but you have a problem with guns. It comes back to you have a problem with tweaking. They just did some modification to the gun laws, but that's there was some compromise. And well, why do you have to compromise when it comes to gun safety? But you have no problem with saying a woman doesn't have a right. But you get shut down immediately when you start talking. So why is it that some things are okay to discuss and some things aren't, and that some actions taken against some things and actions aren't taken against others? What makes that right? And man, I'll tell you, Virgil, I'm getting tired of it, man. I'm getting tired of people. I know that we vote for people to represent us, but I can tell you right now, some of the things that people do definitely don't represent the things that I believe in and the things that I would expect those individuals who are making our laws do. It is like I said earlier, man. Politics have become a bullying process, and name calling, name shaming, threatening. People's lives are in danger. It is just I never, you never think that it would get. You think as you move away from the civil rights era to the 70s, 80s, 90s, there's always going to be some type of interruption. But you would think now, man, in 2022, with all the technology that we have, so much education, so much people have the opportunities to go to churches and things like that, and to be at peace for so. You would think we would have that platform, but it doesn't seem. That seems like the nation or some in the nation aren't happy unless there's some type of controversy or there's somebody. It's amazing. It is amazing, and so yeah, Roe v. Wade is going to impact our departments, and think about this too, Virgil. So now
I don't think it's going to impact because of the protesting. I think it's going to have more of an impact because of the position that police departments and police officers will be put in to enforce the law.
Well, think about this, man. We can be very we can be very morbid at times, and I can see in briefing rooms, I can see officers making jokes about Roe v. Wade. I can see officers making jokes about abortions, and you just never know what somebody is going through or has gone through. I think that those are the kind of things we have to worry about. I do think it's those things. I think you're going to see people, because let's just put it this way. We saw in 2016, we saw police officers actually show who they really are when it came to the election of Donald Trump. The things that were said, things that you never would have thought people would have said before. So I think, and they said it. And now, what makes you think that people won't say insensitive things or things that are that they believe, that they have a right to say? But it's amazing. Isn't it amazing also how the First Amendment can work for some as far as freedom of speech, and for others
it doesn't?
It doesn't. Isn't that amazing? So I think those are the things. You're right. I don't think you're going to see some civil unrest. That's just facts. You're going to see civil unrest because you do have those individuals that take opportunities to participate in protests. And even if those protests start out peaceful, you have individuals who are intentionally come in and make those protests disruptive, and then they move on to the next part. That's what they do. That's what they're happy doing. So I think those are the things we have to worry about. But really and truly, the personal beliefs of police officers are another thing we're concerned about. And then the things that you said earlier about our local ordinances going to put officers in a position to have to enforce. So what happens to that officer when he's told he has to enforce that law, and that officer says, I'm not going to do that. I feel as though that's a violation of, I'm not going to, whether I believe in it or not, I'm not going to go and arrest somebody for something that that they're doing. And so
let me ask you,
what's going to happen when that occurs? I mean, you're going to fire that officer? You're going to discipline that officer? What are you going to do?
Well, let me ask you this question. So that township in Pennsylvania, they created an ordinance that prohibited officers from enforcing or even working with other agencies to enforce the abortion ban. So now you've got a city who has said, we're going to be proactive. We're going to get ahead of this here before the law even changes, and tell our police officers, you will not enforce anything if Roe v. Wade is passed. So now you're going to have other officers at other municipalities who will have to enforce those laws. So I can see officers within police departments saying, well, I'll quit and go somewhere else because that's not right. They're telling me what I can and cannot do, and that's not right. At the end of the day, whether you believe it, whether you believe in abortion or whether you don't, that to me is a decision between that woman and her guy, and whatever reason. And Keith, I've watched so many different news stories this week where there have been medical reasons for women who have received abortions, and that is their choice. And so again, this isn't just because a woman wants to get rid of a child. There are medical reasons that a woman has been told by her physician that it is not in the best interest of her or the child that she is carrying. And the best thing for her to do is to have an abortion. So, again, I think with all of the energy that people use to protest and show up and march, I'm going to say this, and you cannot say it enough, Keith, is that people use that same energy to go stand in line and vote, because these elections matter. Whether it's the presidential election, whether it's your county commissioner, whether it's your county judge, your sheriff. There is a sheriff in Texas, Keith, that I watched last night who was very critical of his governor, Governor Abbott in Texas, because he feels that the governor is using the incident that took place with the semi truck, where I think where the number is up to what, maybe
53 now.
53 people are dead, and you've got the governor of Texas who is politicizing that, blaming the Biden administration. Just before we came on air, Keith, in Texas, a Texas state trooper pulls over a truck, and the truck had a lot of people, Latinos in the truck. One of the guys jumped out of the truck, ran across the interstate, and got hit and killed by a car. So it is just so disheartening to know that you've got people who are trying to get away from a bad situation, and their lives are being destroyed because of that. But you've got politicians who want to blame the Democrat for it because of the politics in it. That's
Virgil, both parties do that sometimes. And at the end of the day, case in point, the Uvalde situation, man, people start pointing fingers, and these families are grieving. I mean, a lot of these families agree. If you're going to work on that situation behind the scenes, and then when there's time to make it public. But you don't start, people on the right, people on the left don't start pointing fingers when you have 19 babies and 2 teachers killed in a situation. You don't start pointing fingers. The situation that happened the other day, doesn't matter where these individuals were coming from. It matters the fact that you had 53 people that were dead, and then you start pointing fingers. It comes down to the point of people's opinions and agendas are valued more than a life. Because those individuals were coming from Mexico, because those individuals were in the back of the truck, because those individuals may have not been here, would not have been here legally. Okay, we get it. But at the end of the day, those are human lives. That somebody's family member, and the tragic way that they died. Man, let's stop.
Can you imagine, Keith?
No, I can't.
They would never know that their family members are dead. Never will.
I can't imagine the horrific way that those people died. And you're absolutely right. There will be some people that may not never know that their family members are dead. But at the end of the day, I say this again, Virgil, let's stop arguing when these type of tragic events happen. Let those families mourn in peace. Do your arguing behind the scenes, and then when it's time to make your public concerns, don't make them political. Man, after the immediate death of 53 people, Abbott should not have been pointing fingers. And I'll say the same thing about anybody else.
Exactly.
We got to stop that, man.
Yeah.
We got to. That's counterproductive. It doesn't get us anywhere. And I get it. I get it. There are laws that people don't agree with. I'm a firm believer you should have immigration laws. But at the end of the day, some of the things that we're talking about are extreme. some of the laws we're talking about are extreme. And where is your heart? Where's your heart? Where's your humility when it comes to the fact that the only thing on your mind is pointing fingers at someone else? And is that what you do to win an election? Do you do that because it's an election year? But then your heart is cold, man. Your heart is very cold.
Exactly. Well, Keith, we're coming up on the last few minutes of the podcast, and it's what we're talking about is how will Roe v. Wade impact policing, and it's a concern, and we've got another. Bree has made another comment. She said we're making women have babies, so many can't take care of themselves, let alone the child. This is just a revolving door, a continuous problem.
Hey, look what Jay said. Hey man, Jay Hill.
Where's Jay at?
Jay's right on point. He says our country is so divided and other countries are watching. Just like Pearl Harbor, while the country was sleeping, the wolf came in. The wolf came in the back door while we were working about worrying what's going on at the front door. And that's so true. And Roe v. Wade just divided us
even more.
The gun law debate has divided us. The January 6th insurrection has divided us. People are more concerned with right and left than they are with what's going on in the center. And what's in the center? Your heart. So you can have right hand, left hand, but what keeps your right arm, left arm? What keeps those functioning?
Yeah.
Your heart. Your heart, based on everything that goes on in your heart, which supplies the blood and everything, which is the center of your life. People have forgotten about that. They're so worried about playing tug of war and realize that when you pull two arms out, people bleed to death based on the fact of all the blood that your heart provides. So it is disheartening, and I don't know how much more this country can take, how much more division this country can take.
Yeah, well, Keith, I'm gonna say this in the last two minutes of the podcast. People, there are elections going on that will occur in November, Keith?
Yeah, primary is going on that right.
Yeah. So if you have family who live in Georgia, who live in some of these states where there are key Senate races going on, this isn't the time to sit at home and say your vote doesn't count. Encourage everybody who is legally to go and vote, because these elections are important. And I don't care if,
Well, every election is important. Every election.
Every election is. So again, just encourage people to get out and vote. So these things that we're talking about at some point will change. So
Virgil, would you vote for me?
Oh yeah, man. I'll vote for you, man.
You would?
Yeah.
You'd vote to impeach me?
I wouldn't vote to impeach you, man. And I may vote to tell you got to shave that gray beard, but I ain't gonna vote to impeach you.
You know what's so funny about that? You wouldn't say the same thing. You would say that if you could grow one. Your beard grows in. Your beard grows in just like your hairline grows in.
Yeah. Well, hey, Jay, we want to thank you too. Hey, Keith, the 4th of July holiday is coming up. We want to remind everybody to have a safe holiday and definitely be responsible. Don't drink and drive, and definitely tune in to the podcast show next Thursday for another episode of You and the Law podcast. And everybody have a great 4th of July weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, Virgil, before we go, I've got to give a shout out to the men of Phi Beta Sigma and the women of Zeta Phi Beta. I got to give a shout out to them.
Well, you know what, man?
Got to give a shout out to my blue and white family.
All right, man. Well, I know they're listening, so we'll definitely thank them for listening. So, brother, it's been good, and we will see you again next Thursday.
All right, man. Get out here and mow this lawn, man, before it gets too dark.
Hey, well, you know what? it's good to see that you're getting out on your riding lawnmower. Hey, send a picture so I can see that. I'm gonna share that picture on our You and the Law podcast Facebook page.
Yeah, that's a lie because you're not gonna get that picture. All right, brother.
All right, man. Y'all have a good night, and thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you next Thursday
love
on
y'all.
You and the Law podcast.